In the recent Warframe update, Archguns got buffed, and I want to talk about them. It's not that Archguns were necessarily bad before. I suppose there were some that weren't getting used, but I'm not entirely sure which ones. I haven't been paying attention to an Archgun meta, but at least the one that I like to use, being the Mausolon, it never felt bad to begin with. But thanks to this recent Archgun buff, I can say with great certainty that the Mausolon is now one of the more hilarious weapons in the game. The Archgun buff that I am referring to is simply this. You can now attach one primary and one secondary arcane of your choosing onto any Archgun, and both of these will require you to use an Archgun Arcane adapter though, so you do need to go and farm, or I guess buy that. When primary and secondary weapons got access to arcanes like these, I do remember a lot of people immediately ditching things like Serration in favor of the Acolyte arcanes like your Deadheads, your Merciless, etc. So I can see an immediate pull towards these kinds of arcanes for the Archguns, but here's the rub. Archguns already have something called primed Rubedo-lined barrels, so we already have a primed base damage mod for these arcanes, so we already have a lot of extra base damage to begin with. So, instead of the Merciless types, I want to draw your attention to my favorite secondary arcane, which is of course secondary Encumber. For those wondering, you originally could get it from Otak in Deimos, but now you can get it from Nightcap, the mushroom guy. Whenever the weapon does a status proc, there is a 24% chance to get another random status effect. What's cool about this arcane is that the weapon has every status proc in the game attached to it, even if it's not doing the damage of every physical and elemental type in the game. And in the chaos of the various status procs we can trigger thanks to this arcane, there are a few that I find to be particularly useful. The first one is Puncture with more crit chance against that target. The second one is Cold with more crit damage against that target. The third one is Viral, which increases your damage against their health. The fourth one is Blast, which is of course a build up towards an explosion that does a lot of AoE damage upon death. Then we have Corrosive and Heat. Both of these are of course armor reduction. And finally we have Magnetic, which increases your damage against shields. It's also pretty useful in that if you break enemies' shields while they have the magnetic effect, it results in a pretty sizable hit to their health, so that's very, very useful as well. The other elemental status procs are also pretty useful. They're just not, in my opinion, as chaotic and as impactful as the ones that I just listed. Hello everyone, welcome back. Before we continue with the primary arcane that I am using, I just want to remind you all to like the video and subscribe to the channel, especially if you're a Genshin player. That being said though, look, for the Warframers out there, I think I'd only plan to talk about the Oberon rework and the Archgun buffs, so now that I've done both of these videos, I'm not entirely sure what I want to talk about next. Maybe Noko, if I get around to actually finishing his farm. I'm just missing his new optics, so that's a little bit annoying. But I suppose, you know, when that shows up, then there we go. Meanwhile, for the Genshin players out there, there's of course a few things to talk about in Genshin, in particular the Archon quest, and I'm probably still going to get Nefer. I don't know. Well, don't hold me to anything, but I think I'm going to get Nefer, or I've probably already got Nefer by the time this video comes out. So if you are interested in being notified of the latest content on the channel, don't forget to ring that bell icon so that you can be hit with those notifications. And on top of that, if you hype the video, that can be very useful for the algorithm. Meanwhile, for the primary slot, I've been quite partial towards Primary Frostbite. You trigger a cold proc and then you get some crit damage and some multi-shot. The idea is to build your Mausolon to do cold damage whilst using secondary Encumber to also further rapidly build up those Frostbite stacks as well as every other status effect so that you're doing maximum damage. The problem is that, as I realized recently, Mausolon actually has innate heat damage, so in order to bypass that, you're going to need to use 3 entire elemental mods in order to actually make that happen, to make a dual elemental with heat, so something like gas, which is toxin plus heat for example, and then you add that cold mod so that the Mausolon starts doing cold damage. That way you can actually start building those Frostbite stacks faster. Honestly, that might not be the worst idea, but not exactly all that exciting when there's some alternatively nice mods available to use. So if I'm not using Primary Frostbite, do I just go back to using the Deadhead types? Well, no, not really, because it turns out there's actually a hilarious arcane to use called Primary Crux. This arcane is pretty straightforward. If you hit a weak point, you start getting more status chance, and you also get some ammo efficiency. There are 10 stacks to try and achieve. By the way, it's hitting a weak point. You don't have to kill an enemy with a weak point. attack. This is hilarious on two parts. If you manage to get the full at R5, 60% ammo efficiency, that actually comes out to basically effectively 2.5 times more ammo. The Mausolon magazine of 300 effectively becomes 750, although it does ramp up, so technically it's a little bit less than that. The Mausolon ammo pool of 1200 basically becomes 3000. You can also get up to 300% status chance. So the Mausolon has 26% status chance at base, plus 300% status chance is basically a 4 times multiplier on your base status chance. So at full stacks, you're basically guaranteeing 1 status proc per hit because you have more than 100%, which further boosts secondary Encumber's chances of another random status proc. So after that realization, here's the build that I'm now using on the Mausolon. Previous B-roll footage in this video would have been showing me using Primary Frostbite. If you have a look, you'd notice that it wasn't triggering so often, so that kind of sucked. Primary Crux, on the other hand, which is not necessarily a DPS buff, I suppose, I don't know, does seem to at least help with solving the distinct problem of Archguns needing heavy ammo, which is somewhat rare unless you're, I guess, surrounded by heavy enemies. All of these mods should be pretty straightforward to understand. We've got our base damage, the multi-shot, fire rate, crit. I am, however, not actively using any status chance mods because once we've gone past the 100% status chance mark from Primary Crux alone, any additional status chance doesn't actually help with secondary Encumber. It actually has a tiny ICD on random procs per enemy hit. So instead, apparently multi-shot will be the only way that helps with status effect generation from this particular arcane. So that's where Containment Breach actually comes in along with the other multi-shot mods. There's only actually 2 multi-shot mods, Containment Breach and the regular multi-shot mod. Archgun Ace is there really just as a flex slot. I suppose if some other super capacity expensive mod shows up, then I would swap that out. But in the meantime though, secondary Encumber doesn't actually care about punch through, so the other punch through mods don't really work for this particular build. Primary deadly efficiency will maybe occur once every university semester thanks to the power of the Primary Crux, so I'm not really using that, although maybe I could consider it. It's an idea. And then of course all the other super expensive mods that exist right now for Archguns, I'm already using their primed versions to begin with. If something new and expensive shows up, yes, Archgun Ace will probably be what I swap out. I have dabbled with some other Archguns as well, mainly the Larkspur Prime. I thought I was going to end up using that as my go-to because you can actually just use a coal mod and suddenly you can get those Frostbite stacks. But I get the feeling that it's not really going to be the weapon for me. Well, I mean, it's great. It's just not really going to be as exciting to me as the Mausolon. I also tried using the Prisma Dual Decurions because apparently those are strong, but they don't seem as impactful as the Mausolon. So yeah, at the end of the day, the Mausolon ends up being my go-to Archgun of choice. With the Primary Crux Arcane as well, I think I'm going to end up using this in a lot more content that doesn't really favor my bow. I'm talking about things like Lephantis, maybe the Fragmented one, although you can actually use a bow at the Fragmented one event in order to do a lot more damage when you hit those balls inside the Fragmented one. So I don't know. I'm just going to have to figure it out from there. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. What are your favorite Archguns and what arcanes are you using on them? Let me know in the comments. Hopefully this Archgun buff means that people will feel like being heavy gunners a lot more. I mean, it is a buff after all, so that usually happens. So just another thing to add to your arsenal of basically, you know, war machines that we are using, because they are, of course, called Warframes. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Warframe content, maybe. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Deep within this millennia-old Orokin-turned-infested ship lurks a creature created to fight in an old war. Make your way to its location and dispatch this monster.